The city of Santa Fe moves slowly, and it's okay with things moving slowly. Santa Fe is very proud of its history and wants it to stay as it is. So our goal in this planning process was to teach the city of Santa Fe how to move forward.
This place, this Railyard, the first train arrived here in 1880, and for almost 100 years, the railroad was a center for both commerce and for tourism. It was really a place that people knew about and cared about for generations. By the 1980s, the interstate highway system was completed, and it really rendered obsolete a lot of the functions of the Santa Fe Railyard.
As a result, it was largely unused. There was one excursion train taking tourists out on the weekend, and that was about it.
This 37 acres up here was basically either a dust bowl or a mud pit, depending on the time of year. And during that same period of time, Santa Fe was growing. And this land, which is adjacent to the historic downtown, became very valuable.
Suddenly, the Atchison and Topeka rail line decided that they would develop it.
There were discussions between the corporation and the city government with no community participation whatsoever. And then some of us got together and said, wait a minute, this has to be a public conversation. This is a place people for generations have cared about.
They had the development plan actually approved where they would tear up all the rail, demolish everything, and build 1.5 million square feet. The citizens of Santa Fe didn't want that to happen.
Basically, it was a strong sense of sadness. Is this what our heritage has come to? Another faux adobe shopping mall and a hotel. There was so much opposition that the city government actually had to reject the master plan.
That's when the city bought the property in 1995 and completely changed the whole paradigm.
So here we were, at the end of 1995, the city owns the Railyard. It was an incredibly bold move for this small town to take this property out of the private sector. But the question, of course, was what to do with it. The people who were paying for this property ought to be involved from the very beginning in planning for it. So we talked at length about creating a community-based planning process, which was unprecedented in Santa Fe, had never been done here. As we were sort of designing the process, the local AIA chapter, I think led by Gayla Bechtel, suggested a UDAT.
I thought the UDAT would really help galvanize and also concentrate the conversation.
A UDAT is a great program where the American Institute of Architects brings in appropriately selected experts to supplement a community's existing knowledge.
The UDAT had positives and negatives. Positives were that you get this incredible expertise from professionals all across the country who have experience with large-scale development, all aspects of it, giving you basically free advice.
We needed experts on trains, and we needed experts that had done a project of this scale before, because no one in Santa Fe had.
The negative, and I was one of the people who objected to it in the beginning, the biggest negative was that if it became evident that experts were going to come into Santa Fe and design the Railyard, it would discourage participation by the community. And that was antithetical to what we were intending.
You don't just easily have outsiders come in and say, let's spend almost $600 million unless they'd done it before and they knew what it would take.
So what we agreed to do was have our community-based planning process for 10 or 12 months and then have UDAT come in at the end of that and see what we had done, see how far we had gotten, and bring in their expertise.
And the UDAT was a very small window. That window was very intense, very accurate, very creative, but it was a very small window in a long process.
No city should do any long-range planning without such a community adventure as that experience with the Santa Fe Railyard.
We had a series of public meetings, and they started off with very basic things like learning from the neighborhood. What do the people in this town think about the Railyard?
Public hearings began where any person or group could present their ideas.
And we had hundreds of people come to these meetings.
6 months, weekly meetings. Some people just died of exhaustion and disappeared, and others stayed in there.
We sort of ended the 10-month process with questions about specific land uses. What were the preferred uses that the people of the town wanted to see on the Railyard?
Should we have a convention center in the Railyard? Should we have hotels in the Railyard? Should we have a park in the Railyard? Should we have housing in the Railyard? But it essentially served as what architects call programming. It defined what people wanted in the Railyard and what the priorities were.
The National UDAT team, consisting of 10 volunteer advisors, arrived for a 4-day charrette.
They were people who really understood community-based planning. They were really into thinking out of the box. And they encouraged participation. They did many, many interviews. They took tours all around town, tours of the Railyard, and then they hunkered down and they started doing their work. There were, sections of the UDAT on governance, on implementation, on planning, on transportation that really helped to bring this all together into what became the community plan.
They also gave us a financial plan. So it enabled people who are just normal citizens to visualize what this might look like in the future. And it also gave City Council and our financial directors what the commitments might actually be financially.
So there was this synthesis of almost a year of public participation. Over 7,000 residents participated either through the meetings, through surveys, through questionnaires. That was more than 10% of the population of the town.
The team presented its recommendations to an enthusiastic public.
And they loved the plan. They thought it was really, really great. And were very supportive of it. And they poured out en masse to the City Council to convince the City Council that they were in deep support of it.
The councilors enthusiastically and unanimously adopted the community plan.
There were some recommendations, some changes, but there was almost universal buy-in and gratitude.
After the 6-month-long planning process, the community was ready for it to happen.
If you're an architect, there's nothing easy about getting things built. That's just part of what you do.
Finally, in 2008, we were ready for a grand opening. What we had was the brand new 10-acre park, the plaza, industrial buildings which had been restored through adaptive reuse for local businesses. We had some new buildings that were operating. We had a commuter train from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, and the first train arrived during our grand opening celebration in 2008.
We had over 10,000 citizens come out, and what I loved most of all was that it wasn't filled with architects, or economists or something. It was filled with families.
I was here with my family. I had my grandson on my shoulders, and I just had tears in my eyes. It was so gratifying to see thousands of Santa Feans appreciating and enjoying their new community space.
The city has stayed dedicatedly supportive to this project.
We have young families that use it. We have artists that show their wares. We have the farmers market. People see it as a real community space, and that feels really good.
What's happening is that the public spaces on the Railyard are really becoming a community gathering space, which is the original intention.
I'm most proud of the democracy that happened. Helping someone have a voice that otherwise wouldn't have a voice in the process was for me the most gratifying. It was just cool.
Here we are, we're now 25, 30 years from the time the city bought the property. But that's just a blip in time for a 400-year-old city. And I'm very gratified at the way the community has adopted the Railyard.